This book is called Gregorio and the White Llama by Bannon. Bannon was born in Acme, Michigan, just a little bit east of Traverse City. She went to school at the Art Institute of Chicago and became an educator, an author, and illustrator in the city of Chicago. If you go to the Newberry Independent Library in Chicago, see several of her books that she published. The Spanish word is llama, L-L-A-M-A, but the same spelling is also the word for the animal, llama, that comes from Peru. On this page we see Gregorio's house. Here are Sister Clotilda and mother and baby brother. And this is Father Condori and Gregorio. And this last illustration is the pasture land. Gregorio and the White Llama. High up in the mountains of Peru, there is a land of clouds and rocks and grass and big cactus plants with red flowers. There are more than 50 groupings of the native people of Peru, most of them descended from the Incas. Gregorio Condori was one of those descendants. He was a very lucky boy because his father owned a herd or train of llamas. But he didn't feel lucky at all. More than anything else in the whole world, Gregorio llama trained all by himself. But every time he coaxed to do it, his father answered just like fathers everywhere. He said, "When you are older." Lately, Father had sometimes been saying, "When you are more responsible." Gregorio knew, all right, just what Father meant by that. It was Gregorio's job to keep a close watch over the llamas while they fed on the coarse, each a grassy pasture. But even though he liked the llamas very much, he got tired of watching them all day as they grazed. His big trouble was that sometimes, when the afternoon sun warmed the chilly air, he would fall asleep in spite of himself. Then the llamas would wander away out of sight. He knew this was not the way to be more responsible. He also knew that if he couldn't prove to his father responsible, he would never be able to drive the llama train. Gregorio sat on the big rock with his arms round his knees and his feet tucked under his poncho. He opened his eyes extra wide just to be sure he was not falling asleep as he watched the llamas grazing near the rock. They were all fine llamas, but the big white one was the pride of the Condori family. He was the leader, and besides being beautiful, he was especially smart. Gregorio couldn't imagine doing anything more thrilling than driving a llama train with this wonderful white leader at the head. It'd be easy to do, he thought, easier than watching them all day in the pasture without falling asleep. A rooster crowed on the opposite mountain. Creakle! Then the cathedral bells rang in the village, down the cliff, almost straight below the pasture. The sky was as blue as anything. Gregorio watched the gray and white clouds streak across the snow-covered peaks like a swift train of llamas. He grew drowsy as he watched them, and soon he fell asleep. He dreamed he was driving the cloud llamas. He raced after them, calling out to the white leader in a deep voice like Father's, "Vamos! Hurry, white one! On with you!" Faster and faster they sped, and soon they reached the narrow streets of the village below. A man called out, "What will you take for the white one, senor?" Gregorio patted the money bag at his belt and called back, "Money cannot buy him." The sun sank behind a mountain peak, and Gregorio kept on dreaming, all hunched up under his poncho, with his head on his knees. In a little straw-covered hut in the distance, Gregorio's mother was starting the supper. She had built a fire on the raised fireplace in the middle of the hard earth floor. Smoke from the fire curled out the open door of the hut. Here, Sister Clotilda was playing with Bebecito, the baby brother. Father Condori came up to the hut with a pile of empty sacks on his back. He stood the sacks inside the doorway and said, "Has Gregorio brought in the llamas yet?" As he said it, he squinted his eyes and looked out at the pasture land. It didn't take Father long to understand the meaning of the bump he saw on the big rock. "Oh, the boy has gone to sleep again," exclaimed Father angrily. He stalked across the pasture, calling, "Gregorio! Gregorio!" Gregorio woke with a sudden start. Father was right beside him, calling his name, and the llamas were nowhere in sight. Oh, he had done it again. "A fine son I have," said Father. "Every day you ask to drive the llama train, yet you cannot be trusted to watch the beasts in the pasture. Perhaps this time you have really lost them." Gregorio was scared. He ran quickly with Father to a rise in the land and peered into the dusky gully below. Father heaved a big sigh of relief. The llamas were there, grazing peacefully. Father drove them back to the pen built against the side of the hut. "How do you think we would get the sacks of grain to the mill tomorrow if the llamas were lost?" scolded Father. The next day, Gregorio and Mother helped Father fill the grain sacks, and Clotilda watched Bebecito and shooed the chickens out of the grain. The sacks were all exactly the right size, for if too many pounds are put on Llama's back, he will lie down and he won't get up until they are taken off. Gregorio thought this was very strange. Father and Mother often carried huge loads. On the mountain paths and in the marketplaces, native peoples could be seen everywhere carrying such things on their backs as sewing machines and pigs and jars so big that a man could crawl into one of them. Neighbor Quispe's little burro didn't complain when she put a load of grass on his back, and then climbed on top with the baby. But everyone knew they couldn't do that to a llama. When all the sacks were filled and loaded on the llamas' backs, Mother tied Bebecito in her carrying shawl. Father called out, "Vamos, we are on our way." The white llama started off down the trail from the hut, and the family trotted along behind. They zigzagged back and forth past big clumps of cacti. Pretty soon they were in the village streets. When they came to the big plaza, the white llama stopped at the little hat shop on the corner. He stood and gazed at the windows. "Vamos!" shouted everyone. "On with you!" Father and Mother and Gregorio pushed and pulled and coaxed. The llamas blocked the street. Automobile horns honked. The drivers shook their fists and shouted, "Clear the way!" But people, burros, automobiles had to wait until the white llama was ready to move on. He liked the shiny glass windows, filled with rows of colored straw hats, and he always stopped for a while to look at them. When they got started again, the llama train passed the big cathedral with its dark red doors. Then it turned into the courtyard of the mill where the llamas were unloaded. They chewed their cuds while they waited. Gregorio and Clotilda liked the mill room. Fine white flour flew through the air. The mill room floor was always powdered with it. It puffed up between toes and was carried in long ghost tracks across the courtyard by the soles of bare feet. Today an artist was sitting at the end of the courtyard sketching the llamas. Now he started walking around the white llama while he sketched him. Gregorio and Clotilda stood on tiptoe to see the drawings on his bed, and this is what they saw. The artist sketched a back view, front view, and three-quarter view. Then he squatted on the ground, squinted his eyes, and looking up under the white llama's chin, he sketched him from that angle. As Father and Mother Condori came up, the artist took his pipe out of his mouth and made a little speech to Father. "You have a very fine llama. I would like your permission to have him pose for a statue I am to make. I will pay you well if you will let the children bring him to my studio each morning at 10 o'clock, beginning 2 days from now." Gregorio was all ears as he listened to the artist talk. Now his heart turned a big somersault and then sat very still, listening for Father's answer. To drive the llama to the village and watch the artist make a statue would be a wonderful and important event. "We are honored to have the llama pose, Senor," said Father. "I will see that he gets to your studio at the proper time." Gregorio's heart fell kerplop to the bottom of his stomach. He knew Father was remembering that he had fallen asleep again while he watched the llamas. Oh, why had he done it? "The sun is low. We must be on our way," said Father. Mother hitched Babycito higher on her back and tightened the knot in her shawl. "Vamos!" The white llama started off down the street, followed by the rest of the train. A woman with a candy stand called out, "Sweets for small pennies!" And Father bought some candied oranges in a pretty striped sack. They nibbled at the oranges as they trotted along under the little balconies that hung over the street. Then up the mountain trail they went. Father took a shepherd's pipe from his belt and played a little tune upon it. Gregorio and Clotilda sang the words. "Up and down the mountain, here and there we go. A mountain with its feet in sand, its head up in the snow." The mountain picked up the sweet music and tossed it across to another mountain. Fainter and fainter it became until Father had to start it all over again on his pipe. The blue of the sky grew very deep. Families were building fires to cook their suppers. The lights twinkled on like stars against the dark mountains. The white leader was a light spot moving up a trail that was so steep it seemed to lead straight into the sky. The others followed single file. When Gregorio lay down on his straw bed that night, wrapped snugly in a wool blanket, he thought about his big trouble. If he could prove he was more responsible, perhaps Father would still let him drive the white llama to the artist's studio. He thought and thought. Finally, he had a plan. Then he fell asleep. The next day, Gregorio filled the striped candy sack with yarn and took it to the pasture with him. As soon as the llamas began to graze, he found some straight, dry stalks and climbed upon the big rock. Keeping one eye on the llamas, he tied the stalks together in a little frame and slipped the sack over it. Then a long string tail to that, and tied twigs onto the tail. The first time he tried to fly the little kite, it took a nosedive. The tail was too light. He tied on more twigs. Now it staggered along close above the rocks. Oh, the tail was too heavy. Gregorio was so busy that it wasn't hard at all to stay awake. When the little kite finally sailed high in the air, he noticed the white clouds that rode over the towering mountain peaks. Now they seemed to grow tired and were sitting down to rest on the mountainside. He watched them sprawl out and roll down the mountain, swallowing up everything they came to. Soon they would settle in the pasture and hide the llamas from sight. Quickly, Gregorio pulled in the kite. Picking up a big stick, he ran around the llamas to herd them together, and at the white one to start him off toward the hut. Father Condori was coming in from the grain field. "That was a wise thing to do, Gregorio," he said. "Am I more responsible?" asked Gregorio. Father cleared his throat. "Yes, my son. I have decided that you and Clotilda may take the white llama to the artist's studio tomorrow." "Oh, 1,000 thanks, Father. The white one will be safe, you'll see." He ran into the hut to tell Clotilda about it. Gregorio was up before the sun the next morning. He crept quietly out the door of the hut to take a look at the white llama. The black night was just uncovering a world all white with frost. It was icy cold and bothered the llamas. They had great heavy coats to keep them warm. Gregorio picked grass out of the white llama's coat and brushed his fleece until it was clean and fluffy. Just to make him look prettier, he placed a string of silver bells around his neck. On the white llama's back, Gregorio tied a little make-believe sack, the kind that llamas wear when they are dressed up for a fiesta. After a quick breakfast of hot porridge, Clotilda and Gregorio were ready to start to the artist's studio. "We go!" called Gregorio. "Remember to keep to the left if you meet an automobile," warned Father, "and the saints be with you." The white llama was off down the trail. As he swung his long neck back and forth, the bells rang merrily. His spirits were as light as his load. "Not so fast, white one," called Gregorio. "You will fall off the mountain ledge." "He thinks he has wings like the vultures and can fly to the cathedral dome," laughed Clotilda, who was running. So Clotilda kept running along behind as fast as her short legs could carry her. When they reached the village, it was safer to go more slowly. The shopkeepers, opening their stalls along the street, stopped to watch the white llama pass. How wonderful to drive such a beautiful animal, thought Gregorio. But at the hat shop, the llama stopped as usual. "Come on, be a good llama," coaxed Gregorio and Clotilda. "You will make us all late to the artist's studio." "Maybe he likes to look at the rows of colored hats, the way we like to look at the rows of frosted cakes in the bakery windows," said Clotilda. "They are made of straw that is like the grass he eats," said Gregorio. "Come on, foolish one, they would make you sick if you ate them." But the white llama braced his legs when they pushed him. He gazed at the window undisturbed until he was ready to leave. Then they headed him off down the street. At the studio, they found the artist ready to start working. With a heavy wire he had made a little skeleton that was something like the shape of a llama. "This will be the bones for my clay llama," he said. "It will keep the clay from sagging into a lump." He posed the Condori llama in a sunny spot in the courtyard and then began packing wet clay around the little skeleton. Gregorio and Clotilda stood so still against the whitewashed wall of the courtyard that they looked like pictures painted there. Their eyes followed every move the artist made. People passing in the street stopped in the doorway to watch. They gazed in wonder as the clay that grew slowly under the artist's hands became more and more a body with legs and a neck and a head. They looked at the white llama and said, "What an excellent model he makes." The Condori llama was indeed an excellent model. Usually, when models pose, they grow tired and their heads droop forward. The artist is forever having to say, "Will you lift your chin a little, please? A little more. No, that's too much. There. That's just right, thank you." This was not necessary with the Condori llama. He held his head high. But sometimes a lump could be seen traveling up his long neck to his mouth. Then he would begin chewing his cud, swinging his lower jaw from side to side. This was a specially good time to get that grass chewed that he had stowed away in one of his 4 extra stomachs. Day after day the white llama posed, and the clay llama grew more and more complete. It was wonderful. The dull, heavy clay from the bucket had become a spirited little animal. Somehow it was more than just a statue of the white llama. The onlookers' faces were full of pride as they thought, "There is no other creature so noble-looking as the llama of." At the end of the week the artist said, "It will not be necessary for your llama to pose again. Here is the money for your father, and here is some for the 2 of you to spend as you like." He handed Gregorio a handful of bright coins. Gregorio counted the coins eagerly. There were 50 centavos. What a lot of money! This was as much as father could earn in a long day. Gregorio felt that it must be spent for something very special. He tied the money in the corner of his woolen poncho. Then he and Clotilda hurried home, eager to show it to father and mother. "You have done well, my son," said father, "and I am proud of you." During the week that the white llama posed for the artist, father and mother had worked from early morning until sunset, threshing out more grain. Now it was tied in sacks and ready to be carried to the mill. Gregorio was helping to load the sacks on the llamas' backs. Father Condori placed the sack on the white llama's back and was starting to tie it when suddenly the white llama flipped back and plopped himself on the ground, grumbling. What was wrong here? This sack was of the proper size. Perhaps the white llama had carried the fancy little make-believe sack so long that he could not judge the weight of a decent sack of grain. Father Condori took it off his back and waited for him to get up. Then he put the sack on again. Now the white llama shocked everyone. Wheeling around, he glared at father, his eyes sharp with anger. He pulled his head back for a better aim and spat straight into Father Condori's face. Clotilda's and Gregorio's eyes and mouths were round with surprise. "Oh, so-ho!" roared father just as angrily. "So! We shall see. Now you are worth only the wool on your lazy back." The other llamas were soon loaded, and father drove them down to the mill with the brown llama in the lead. The white llama was left alone in the pasture in disgrace. Gregorio stayed at home to watch the white llama. How sad, he thought. Nothing could ever come out quite right now, no matter how old or how responsible he might grow to be. Maybe someday father would let him drive the llama train by himself, but it wouldn't be half so exciting without the white leader. The white llama was unhappy too. He didn't eat and he didn't chew his cud. He just stood looking down the trail toward the village. When a fog settled like a ceiling over the pasture, Gregorio put him in the pen. It was late when Father Condori came home with the llamas. In the fog, the brown llama had taken the train down the wrong trail at each turn. Father was scratched by thorns and very tired. Father Condori went out to the llama pen the next morning. With big shears, he cut off the white llama's thick coat of wool. "Should such a back be beautiful? No," said father. "This wool will make a fine covering for the backs of those who earn their daily meal." The white llama looked so funny without his wool that father had to laugh. His legs were too thin, his joints were too big, and his neck was oh so skinny. With the shearing, all his grace and dignity seemed to have left him. The poor creature put back his ears and lay down, complaining mournfully. A cool breeze from the mountain glaciers made him shiver. He felt very sad and gloomy. As Mother Condori was coloring the white llama's wool with dye, she said again and again, "It will be a pleasure to make things from this lovely wool. It takes the bright colors so well." When the wool was dry, she spun it into yarn. Then for father she made a cap designed with rows of little people and trees. She crocheted a pair of dolls for Clotilda and a pretty new bonnet with ruffles for Bebecito. For Gregorio, she knit a beautiful money bag, just like father's. Now he wouldn't have to tie the coins in the corner of his poncho. Because there was some wool left, she made a little llama just for fun, and trimmed it as for a fiesta. While Mother Condori was working miracles with the wool, the white llama was growing a thick new coat. Gregorio kept a close watch over the llamas in the pasture. At the same time, he was very busy. He combed wool for Mother, and he made a reed pipe and learned to play a little tune upon it. As the summer passed, the grain grew tall in the fields. Then it turned yellow and had to be threshed. "This is the heaviest crop of grain we have ever had," said father happily. "The llamas will never be able to carry it to the mill in one trip." "Oh, father," cried Gregorio, "why couldn't Clotilda and I drive the train to the mill with the first load tomorrow? You and Mother could be finishing the threshing." "With the brown llama for a leader, it would be unwise," said father. He has a head of stone." "If the day is clear, the brown llama would know his way," coaxed Gregorio. "We would hurry home before the clouds settle." "We would hurry home," echoed Clotilda in a pleading voice that would be hard for any father to refuse. "Well," said father, considering, "we shall see what the morning is like. Perhaps you may if the day is clear." The sun rose into a clear sky the next day, so the llamas were carefully loaded for the trip. "Bring back a sack of flour from the mill," said father, "and remember to keep your voice low when you talk to the llamas. Be home as early as possible, and don't get excited if the llamas give you trouble." Gregorio was already excited. Little thrills were chasing up and down his spine, and he felt as if he had no stomach. "Don't worry, father. We'll be back soon after the noon bells ring," he promised as he fastened his new money bag to his belt. Mother pinned Clotilda's shawl with a cactus thorn. "You can be a big help to Gregorio if the brown llama wants to go down the wrong street," she told Clotilda. But the brown llama did not go down the wrong street. Gregorio drove the train like a grown-up. He had no trouble at all guiding the animals into the courtyard of the mill. It was such fun to drive the train. If only the white llama could have been leader, everything would have been perfect. The miller came to the door of the mill room. His face and arms were covered with flour, and he wore a big smile. "So," he said, "I see your father now has a man to drive the llamas for him." Gregorio felt pleased. He helped the miller unload the sacks and carry them into the mill room. When he brought out the sack of flour to take home, Clotilda spoke to her brother in a low, excited voice. "Look, Gregorio, look!" Their eyes popped in amazement, for stepping neatly over the high sill to the courtyard was their beautiful white llama. He walked over to the llama train and stood calmly with his nose in the air. "He has come by himself," whispered Gregorio. Gregorio carried the sack of flour over to the white llama. Nice boy," he said, patting him while he fastened the sack of flour on his. Then in a deep voice like father's he called out, "Vamos, my white one." With great importance, the white llama pushed his way past the other llamas and stepped into the street. First the brown llama and then the others followed obediently. When they came to the big plaza, both Gregorio and Clotilda laughed aloud. "Our white leader forgets nothing," chuckled Gregorio. "He has stopped at the hat shop again." There in the window of the hat shop was a delicious-looking new hat, a grass-green straw with raspberry-pink trimmings. The white leader stared at it. "Perhaps he really wants to wear the hat, not eat it," said Clotilda. "You know some of the leaders at the fiesta parade wear little caps on their heads." "How much is the green hat, señor?" called Gregorio. The shopkeeper was sitting on the high counter inside his shop. Only his feet and the legs of his check trousers could be seen through the doorway. Now the feet slid slowly to the floor and his head appeared. "The green hat is very new," said the shopkeeper. "It has just come from the big city of Llama. Many people will want to buy it, but I will sell it to you for 75 centavos. "That is too much for one small hat that is not long for wear," said Gregorio. "You would do well to part with it for 35 centavos before it grows old in the shop." No, you joke," wailed the shopkeeper. "I cannot live and sell my hats for 35 centavos. "That is unfortunate, señor. Good day," said Gregorio. "Vamos," he shouted at the white leader, who kept right on gazing at the hat. "One moment, my young man," said the shopkeeper. "You are my first customer today, and so if you will pay me 50 centavos, I will make you a present of the hat." Clotilda watched her brother with admiring eyes. He took the 50 centavos out of his new money bag and handed it to the shopkeeper. Carefully they cut slits in the brim of the green and pink hat for the white llama's ears and tied it on his handsome head. "See, my fine fellow," said Gregorio to the white llama, "you wear a hat prettier than any of the caps of the leader llamas in the force." "Hurry, my white one," called the proud llama driver. "The cathedral bells are ringing. We must be home soon." Father put his hands on his hips and leaning back roared with laughter. "Isn't it good, father, to have our white leader again?" asked Gregorio. Father put his arm around Gregorio. "Yes, Gregorio, and it's also good to have a fine big son." Here you can learn more about llamas. And this has been Gregorio and the White Llama by Bannon.